The CareScape R860 Patient Monitoring. After watching the video, the viewer should be able to, from the present workspace, adjust the following waveform settings: waveform configuration, waveform style, waveform speed, waveform color, waveform and spirometry loop scaling, configure spirometry loops, and configure split screen view. Additionally, from the past workspace, access one of the 4 trend views, access the graphical trends view, utilize the trends timeline cursor, access the numeric trends view, access the trend log, create a snapshot, and view snapshot data. To access waveforms, simply touch in the top right-hand corner of the waveforms. You'll notice the sprocket or gear icon appear. Touch the icon to access the waveform settings. On the Waveform Settings menu, Basic Waveforms, Advanced Waveforms, and Split Screen views can be customized to show up to 4 waveforms with measured data. The top 2 fields, fields 1 and 2, I have 4 options: airway pressure, volume, flow, auxiliary pressure waveforms. In fields 3 and 4, I have 3 more options. I can turn the waveform off, or I can monitor gases from the airway module, CO2 and O2. Waveform style. Waveforms can be set as one of the following styles: solid or outline. I can also change the speed of my waveform from fast to slow. You may have noticed, but I changed my waveform style to outline and my speed to fast. Let's see what it looks like. As you can see, when outline is chosen, the waveform curve or loop is shown as a line in the set color. Additionally, when setting the waveform speed to slow, this is half the speed of fast waveforms. This displays a longer breath pattern, which may be useful during diagnostic interpretation. Now let's go back to settings to change the waveform color. For waveform color, I have 5 choices: red, yellow, blue, green, or white. I'm going to continue to change my waveform colors, and let's see what it looks like. And close it out, and let's go to the screens. So when I change my waveform's colors, I don't only change it for the page I'm currently on, but all pages with waveforms. So my split screen, my advanced waveforms, and my basic waveforms. Let's go back to waveform settings again. And as you notice, I have something called scaling. So it's currently set to auto and manual, so I'm just going to change these to manual scale. Let's say I want to make my pressure and flow waveforms larger and take away volume. So I'm going to go under my settings, and as stated, you can turn off field 3 and field 4. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off field 3, and field 4 is already off. And I'm going to do this on all my screens that display waveforms, and let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to close it out, and as you can see, I have much larger waveforms when I turn the other fields off. To configure the split screen views, simply touch on the top right-hand corner of the split screen. You'll notice the gear icon on the display. Touch the gear icon to open up the configuration menu. Split screen view can be customized to display a spirometry loop or sets of measured data. The split screen has 2 parts: field 1, which is the top portion of the split screen, and field 2, which is the bottom portion of the split screen. Each field can be customized with 10 different options. Let's change field 1 from a pressure volume loop to a flow volume loop. And field 2, per weight, let's change that to breath timing. And let's see what that looks like. As you can see in field 1, I have my flow volume loop now, and below that in field 2, I have my breath timing. To configure the spirometry loop, simply tap the loop itself, and you'll see the gear icon. I currently have the loop in a manual scale, and as you notice, I can adjust both my X and my Y axis with the plus and minus keys. So it's currently in a manual scale. This is good for enlarging the loop itself for diagnostic value. However, if lung mechanics changes, which currently I just did by changing my compliance, and as you notice, my loop is going to reshape, which makes it difficult to see. So I may want to switch this back to auto scale. So that's what I'm currently going to do. I'm going to switch my loop to auto scaling. And as you'll notice, with changes in pulmonary mechanics, the loop is going to automatically auto scale. To access the trend views, from the present, I just swipe over to the past or historical trend workspace. If I'm in the present, I can also open the icon for my past workspace. First, I'd like to present the layout of the trend views. All 4 trend views have the same layout. Starting at the top of the trend view is the trends timeline. The trends timeline shows the past 72 hours of data. So you can think about it as an electronic medical record of ventilator data for 72 hours. Inside the trends timeline is the guide setting. The guide setting is currently turned off. However, the device operator has 4 different choices, from expired minute ventilation, respiratory rate, peak pressure, or end-tidal CO2. On the right-hand side of the trends timeline is the timeline cursor. The timeline cursor highlights the set period on the timeline. The cursor range can be set to highlight 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours. In the middle of a trend view is the trends list. The trends list shows data based on the selected trends view, as well as the period of trending data highlighted by the timeline cursor. On the bottom right-hand portion of the trends list resides the trends list cursor. The cursor can be moved throughout the period shown to specific data points. First, graphical trends. In the trend list, I can scroll on the left portion of the screen just simply by touching and swiping up or down to find the measured metrics I want to view. Additionally, I can go to the right-hand side and I can use the bar also to navigate the list. I'm now going to use the trends list cursor. I'm going to just move this over to the left, and as you can see, as I move it over to the left, the different measured metrics at that minute. So that's a minute window. Now let's use the timeline cursor. I'm going to select the timeline cursor, and what I'm going to use it for is I'm going to zoom in, kind of like a microscope, to find an area of time. And I'm going to use the cursor again to go over to alarm event. As you can see in red, my alarm event. And these are all the measured metrics again for that time interval. I have my trends list cursor active, and say I want to look at numeric trends instead of graphical. So I switched over to numeric trends. It keeps the same timestamp since the trends list cursor is active. And now I can see all the numeric data associated with that minute interval. So I have my mode with all the settings of the mode of ventilation at that time. I can also look at my next tab, which is my measured values. And as you notice, kind of in the left-hand portion, the bottom, there's my alarm in red, and it shows you I've met my alarm threshold. And in the next tab, you can see where my alarms are set. So that's kind of like a little ventilator check at that point in time. To the right of my numeric trends is the trend log. My trend log looks at three things. It looks at my alarms, procedures, and settings, based by the amount of time set by the timeline cursor. If the icon is blue, it means it's active, so I'm just going to make a couple gray so only alarm is active for that 4-hour time period based on that timeline cursor. So these are all the alarms that took place in that 4-hour window. Now I'm going to deselect the alarms also. So everything's grayed out, and I'm going to just select procedures. So the flag icon is the procedures. And the same thing, based on the timeline cursor, these are all the procedures within the last 4 hours. As you'll also notice, to the right of the messages is an eye icon. If I touch the eye icon, it opens it up and it shows me the last measured value. Just going to scroll down, open another one. So that's my last inspiratory hold effort for that time stamp. Let's close that out, and I'm going to turn off my procedures or deselect it. And let's just look at all my setting changes, or not settings, mode changes. So the gear icon or the sprocket icon is just all the mode changes. And that's also based on that timeline cursor up in the top right hand corner. So these are all the mode changes in the last 4 hours. Another thing is quite novel is I can use the time and date stamps and I can go backwards. So say I want to see what my settings were at a certain time on a certain mode. So I'm just going to hit this, go back to my numeric trends, and you can see it saved that same timestamp. And this was my mode of ventilation, and that's all the settings that were going on with that associated mode. And sometimes you might have to go 1 minute back to get the actual mode and the settings associated with the mode when you did the switch or the change. To create a snapshot, simply touch the snapshot hard key on the display. As you notice, it'll say one snapshot created, and I'm going to swipe to the past to my snapshot view. As you can see, it gives me my waveforms. It's not a screenshot, it didn't give me the measured values. Always gives me waveforms. And I have tabs for alarms, measure values, and modes. Snapshot is a great tool for analyzing waveforms, specifically for patient ventilator asynchrony or appropriate ventilator settings. So as you notice, my pressure waveform in the yellow is starting to look weird. So this can be a sign of asynchrony or inappropriate settings or something's going on with the patient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a snapshot. So I took a snapshot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to swipe back and review the snapshot. When we're reviewing the snapshot, you can see from the yellow pressure waveform I have this pressure scooping. So this indicates a flow mismatch, that the flow is not set appropriate for the patient's need. So what I can also do is look at my flow settings, reevaluate, and titrate my flow based on my patient's inspiratory drive. Now I'm just going to use the trends list cursor and move along the pressure waveform and evaluate the different pressures during my inspiratory phases. And you can see the patient's sucking back quite a bit. So we'll have peak pressures in the 22, but they'll suck back so much. So I'm opening up the mode and reviewing my settings. So I don't have a flow setting. It is influenced by my IE ratio or my inspiratory time. So to find my flow rate, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go back to my main page and select my IE ratio, and that will tell me my flow rate. Now let's select the IE ratio setting to evaluate flow rate. When I select a ventilator setting, to the right in the extra information window, it gives me my influences related to that setting. So this is where I'm going to see my flow rate setting based on my IE ratio. It may be a little hard to see, but my flow rate is 25 liters per minute, which is a pretty slow inspiratory flow rate for an active patient. Now I'm just titrating my flow rate. I'm turning it up to meet the patient's inspiratory demand and take away that flow scooping. As you can see, Snapshot's a nice tool to evaluate and compare and contrast present and past events.